Scripture reading this morning comes from the book of Job, chapter 1, verses 1 through 12. There once was a man in the land of Uz, whose name was Job. That man was blameless and upright, one who feared God and turned away from evil. There were born to him 7 sons and 3 daughters. He had 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, 500 donkeys, and very many servants, so that this man was the greatest of all the people of the East. His sons used to go and hold feasts in one another's houses in turn, and they would send and invite their 3 sisters to eat and drink with them. And when the feast days had run their course, Job would send and sanctify them, and he would rise early in the morning and offer burnt offerings according to the number of them all. For Job said, "It may be that my children have sinned and cursed God in their hearts." This is what Job always did. One day, the heavenly beings came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan, who came among them, also came among them. The Lord said to Satan, "Where have you come from?" And Satan answered the Lord, "From going to and fro on the earth, and from walking up and down on it." The Lord said to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job? There's no one like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man who fears God and turns away from evil." Then Satan answered the Lord, "Does Job fear God for nothing? Have you not put a fence around him and his house and all that he has on every side? You've blessed the work of his hands, and his possessions have increased in the land. But stretch out your hand now and touch all that he has, and he will curse you to your face." The Lord said to Satan, "Very well, all that he has is in your power. Only do not stretch out your hand against him." So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord. The word of God for the people of God. So this week we're continuing our passage through the stranger things, the stranger concepts and ideas in the Bible and stories and so forth. And this week we are we're going on a trip to the dark side and talking about Satan and the problem of evil in the Bible. And this, as with most of the topics this month, are just gigantic topics. And so we're just going to take a brief look at one aspect of this issue and maybe put forward some ideas that you can think about with respect to Satan and how evil manifests in the world, potentially through these stories about the adversary in the Bible. So, of course, our passage this morning comes from the very opening of Job, the very first verses of Job, where we see God engaging with Satan concerning the life of Job. And Satan argues that the only reason Job is good is that God has blessed him with abundance. Take away all the plenty, the food and the land and the family and the health of Job, and he will curse you and turn away from you. And God takes him up on this question, and so we get this heart-rending story of Job, whose life is then systematically dismantled by Satan in order to see if he can keep the faith in the face of adversity, and to teach us how we understand our adversity in relationship with God. Now, Job is a huge and complicated and difficult book, and it's a really good one to think about, and sometimes very difficult for us. And I don't dare to do a simple summary in the sermon, but it does introduce us kind of interestingly to the character that has frightened and fascinated us for centuries, and that is the Satan, or Satan, as Dana Carvey used to say on Sunday Night Live. But the legend of Lucifer, this powerful, beautiful, spiritual being who was cast out of heaven to become the Satan, the adversary, is partly construed from passages throughout the Bible, and in particular in the prophets, of whom we learned a bit last month. So if you listen to this passage from good old Uncle Zeke, Ezekiel, from chapter 28, listen to this and see if you can start to piece together some of the story about who this particular angel was, or this being. Ezekiel 28 reads, "You are the seal of perfection, full of wisdom and perfect in beauty. You were in Eden, the garden of God. Every precious stone adorned you, carnelian and chrysolite and emerald, topaz, onyx and jasper, lapis lazuli, turquoise and beryl. Your settings and mountings were made of gold on the day you were created. they were prepared. You were anointed as a guardian cherub. Now remember, from last week, not a chubby flying baby cherub. That's not what cherubs are. Rather, an awe-inspiring being, usually represented as a half-human, half-animal type creature. That's the cherubim. You were anointed as a guardian cherub, for so I ordained you. You were on the holy mount of God, right? Remember that from last week too. That's the in-between place where we belong. A place where the spiritual world and the material worlds overlap. The holy mount of God. You were on the holy mount of God. You walked among the fiery stones. You were blameless in your ways from the day you were created, till wickedness was found in you. Through your widespread trade you were filled with violence, and you sinned. So I drove you in disgrace from the mount of God, and I expelled you, guardian cherub, from among the fiery stones. Your heart became proud on account of your beauty, and you corrupted your wisdom because of your splendor. So I threw you to the earth. I made a spectacle of you before kings. By your many sins and dishonest trade you have desecrated your sanctuaries. So I made a fire come out from you, and it consumed you, and I reduced you to ashes on the ground in the sight of all who were watching. All the nations who knew you are appalled at you. You have come to a horrible end, and will be no more. So this passage from Ezekiel kind of lays out a little bit of this hidden history, I suppose, of this being thrown out of who according to Ezekiel was in Eden, was appointed as a guardian cherub, was found to be wicked, and then thrown out of heaven and ultimately destroyed. Now, if you read that passage or that chapter in its context, Ezekiel or God is talking to the city of Tyre. But the prophets all talk, as we remember from last month, all talk kind of multi-dimensionally, like a poet does, right? There's often layers of meaning. There's sort of a literal layer, and then there's something else that they're talking about at the same time. So you can think about it this way, but you can also think about it that way, and both are correct and intentional. And this passage is a source of our understanding of what happened to this guardian cherub who went astray. Now check out Isaiah 14. This one's kind of interesting too. So Isaiah's older than Ezekiel. He's before that. So and in chapter 14, he talks a little bit about this being as well. He says, "How you have fallen from heaven, morning star, son of the dawn," which is why we associate Lucifer, the beauty of Lucifer, with the planet Venus, which is often either the morning star or sometimes you see it in the evening too, depending on where our cycles are. But anyway, that association with Lucifer to the morning star, to the planet Venus, but they didn't know it was the planet Venus at the time. But they knew there was this beautiful star that moved around that they associated this being with. Anyway, you have been cast down to the earth, you who once laid low the nations. You said in your heart, I will ascend to the heavens. I will raise my throne above the stars of God. I will sit enthroned on the mount of assembly, on the utmost heights of Mount Zaphon. I will descend above the tops of the clouds, and I will make myself like the Most High. But you are brought down to the realm of the dead, to the depths of the pit. Those who see you stare at you, and they ponder your fate. Is this the man who shook the earth and made kingdoms tremble? The man who made the world a wilderness, who overthrew its cities and would not let its captives go home? So another, again, story about the beautiful creature that was cast down out of heaven, or the Mount of Assembly, who sought to seek to go above God and above the heavens, to be like God in that way. So, and then also, of course, we encounter the Bible in the New Testament as well. In the Gospel of Luke, for instance, one out of many passages, we read this passage in was it Luke 11, I think. Jesus was talking to his disciples and told them, "Whoever listens to you," that is, the disciples, "listens to me," Jesus. "Whoever rejects you, rejects me. But whoever rejects me rejects the one who sent me. And the 72 returned with joy and said, Lord, even the demons submit to us in your name. And Jesus replied, I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven. I have given you authority to trample on snakes and scorpions and to overcome all the power of the enemy. Nothing will harm you. However, do not rejoice that the spirits submit to you, but rejoice that your names are written in heaven. Now, that among many of the New Testament passages, but you see this sort of explicit, I saw Satan get cast out of heaven, right, idea from Jesus. When we step back, though, and take a look at Satan in the biblical tradition as a whole, we see two patterns or roles kind of that we can talk through or think about. One tradition sees Satan as a member of God's court, a kind of Loki figure, a trickster and an accuser, but one who is tolerated and plays a particular God-ordained role in the created order. He roams around, tempting and accusing people, and when they fall apart, he delights in pointing it out to God and making a mockery of this whole thing. He's kind of like that one person in the committee who's always trying to poke holes in the plan and be super critical. So on the one hand, that person's a pain in the butt, but on the other hand, they help to make the plan better by pointing out the flaws, and so there's a toleration to the accuser, I suppose you could say. We see that sort of role play out in the passage that we read today in Job, right? Satan just kind of shows up to the assembly, and God wonders where you've been, and so there's a sort of toleration to what Satan is up to. And we could see it in the Garden of Eden as well when we equate the snake with Satan. Though that's a different story and too long to get into. The other pattern or role that we see Satan play on the other side of it, as opposed to this sort of tolerated figure in the created order, is more of the true rebel from God. This is sort of more of the tradition that we're used to, which is to say Satan is not being tolerated or is an intentional part of the economy of God. Instead, Satan is doing everything he can to undermine the creative order, to destroy and manipulate and twist everything that God is doing for his own purposes. This position seems a little more supported throughout the biblical narrative, and it seems to be the way Jesus saw Satan as well. He's not playing any sort of positive role in the created order, either wittingly or unwittingly. He's the enemy and to be rejected. Full stop. So, so remember, like, Satan isn't a name, it's a title. It means the adversary or the enemy, but it does not seem to only be used in reference to a specific, it seems to be only used in reference to this specific individual who, legend has it, is a particularly clever and powerful being that decided in the primordial history of creation to abandon God in favor of his own desires. Right? That's what all of these stories kind of lead to, the summary of it. And this, of course, is the fundamental bedrock of all sin. The idea at the very heart of what goes wrong in creation is that we decide that we know better than God, that we are going to behave not in accordance with God's wishes, but instead we're going to use our own intelligence, our own intuition to guide us. And we're going to set ourselves up as God by attempting, at any cost, to carry out our own will in the world and force everyone around us to bend to our own desires. Right? That's the bedrock. That's sin. That's what Satan sort of encapsulates in this grand cosmic way. And if you're a particularly powerful character, like Lucifer, your rebellion can have catastrophic consequences for the world. But if you're a particularly, small character, like we are, an individual human in this huge world, then we too can participate in this rebellion, and we can terrorize our families and our co-workers and the people around us and make little hells with us at the center. The pattern is exactly the same. It's the scale that's different. You see what I'm saying? And all the 7 deadly sins, or however you want to categorize all the sins that have traditionally been done, those are all just flavors of this archetypal rebellion. I want any partner I desire. That's lust. I want to stuff anything I want into my mouth. That's gluttony. I want everyone to pay attention to me. Vanity, and so on. Right? These are all just variations of one theme. They have different subjects that your will is fascinated or that your will is connected to, but it's the same pattern. I want what I want. And there's no reflection on whether it's good or bad or fits in the good order of God's world. Or even better, what's really happening is that there's a twisting of what is good, right? When we are stuck in this rebellious pattern, what I want, regardless of whether it's good or not, what I want is by my own definition good. That's when we're going toward the dark side. That's when we're moving toward the evil. And that's, in some sense, even more twisted. But think about it. Tyrants are always justifying their bad behavior. It's a good thing for us to exterminate the Jews. They're the ones causing us all our problems, right? It's a good thing to exterminate all the successful farmers, said Stalin, right? They are the ones who are enslaving you and keeping you down, leading to the deaths and sufferings of millions. Right? Evil acts are almost always justified or defined for some reason or another as being good. It's a twisting, right? By the by, this is why politics and policies using group identity should be wholeheartedly rejected. It almost always generates this kind of resentment and violence. It doesn't matter where you are on the political spectrum, left or right. The moment you draw a circle around a group of people based on some property, whether it's race, black, white, women, men, Kurds, Jews, gay, straight, wealthy, poor, it doesn't matter what it is. The moment you draw that circle and cast people into it and say they are the problem, and that they're the reason why we suffer, that is the first step into hell, right? The reason being is that the moment you cast people into the circle, it functionally dehumanizes them. Right? An individual is a whole host of things. You have tons of dimensions to you. And though we may share a single dimension with many other people, you are not the same as them. Not all women are the same, not all men, not all black or white or wealthy or poor. Casting people into that single dimension and judging them on that single dimension makes it easier to dehumanize and do evil things. They're the problem. That's the issue. We need to fix that. As if everybody that fits that one dimension is all the same. So, anyway, projects, policies based on group identity are, in my opinion, a bad direction to take. I think history kind of proves that out. It's a way for us to manifest evil in the world and justify it as good. But at the end of the day, no matter what flavor of evil we're talking about, whether we're wrestling with some personal problem or attempting to enforce our will on giant groups of people by dehumanizing them, it all boils down to that archetypal rebellion. I get to be God, and my will be done. And if you don't like it, I will take you out. That leads to one final point about the nature of evil, and this is important to understand. Because I'm often talking about this dichotomy between order and chaos. That God, in the beginning, took the primordial chaos and fashioned out of it good order. And that God is the kind of ordering principle for all things, all relations, to this day are based on this ordering principle, this relational principle. And I often talk about God being the ground of all being. That's what I kind of am talking about. And that we too, made in the image of God, are creatures who delight in bringing about good order in the world. And so we make families and homes and businesses and churches and so on. That is to say, when we are at our best as human beings, we too order things in a way like God, bringing good order into the world. But as we all know, and I've mentioned this over and over again, we are constantly fighting back the corruptive forces in the world as well. Things are falling apart constantly and of their own accord. The world wants to get back to chaos, it would seem. The principle of entropy, second law of thermodynamics. And so we have to work hard to maintain our creative orderings, lest they fall apart, whether it's physical things or relational things, relationships and so forth. Right? We talked about how our homes fall apart by themselves. No help from us, unless you have children. But that's your own fault. The natural corruptive force, though, that I'm talking about, the second law of thermodynamics and the forces that are sort of continually degrading everything around us and to which we have to fight back, that natural corruptive force is not evil. Right? And we need to make that distinction to be really clear. A thunderstorm drops a tornado and whips through town, disassembling our buildings and our lives and reverting our order back to chaos in like a mile-long swath. Right? That's a terrible event. It's awfully destructive, but it's not really evil. You see, Satan doesn't want to return the ordered world into chaos. He doesn't want to just annihilate everything that was ordered by God, because he too would be annihilated. He too, Satan, is a creature that benefits from God's good ordering. He was a beautiful thing at one point. What he wants is to take good order, God's good ordering, and twist it to serve himself and his own will. Right? That is evil. That's the difference. He doesn't want to destroy the world. He wants to enslave it and bend it to his own desires. He's the Lord of lies and the deceiver. You've heard that. You've heard the idea that the best lies are the ones that are closest to the truth. It's kind of the same pattern. I'm going to take the good order of God and then I'm going to tweak it just enough to serve me. I'm going to corrupt it in some way, that in an evil way that allows it to be a part of my will. Or to serve my will. I'm going to take this good, delicious, delightful food, which is beautiful to taste and to see, and I'm going to want more than I should have, and then I'm going to gorge on it, right? That's the manipulation of the good into something that descends into an evil. I'm going to take the deserved attention and respect that people give me in appreciation for my work, and then I'm going to make myself, and then I'm going to desire it more and more and chase it and make my whole sense of self value the praise and applause that people give me, right? So that's something good being twisted into something evil, right? Evil takes good order and twists it into evil order and serves broken desires. And if evil can't manipulate that good order to serve its own purposes, only then does it seek to destroy it. And that's what happened to Jesus, right? The temptations of Christ did not work. The evil one could not twist Jesus into serving him, if you recall. There were 3 dimensions to his, and those have meaning too, but we don't have time to get into it. The bottom line was that the devil couldn't corrupt Jesus' goodness and twist him into using Jesus' own goodness for the devil's sake. And the devil was like, well, if I can't have it, if I can't corrupt you, then no one will have it. And so twisted the hearts of the leaders of that day to have Jesus executed. But the evil plan backfires, as we know, and Jesus becomes the symbol and the example for how we are to deal with evil in our lives. We're to do our best not to live for our own goodwill, for our own will, but to resign our egos, to live humbly, to do our best to bring good order into the world, right? And what is good order? In some ways it defies description, but it's order that serves others, that benefits others, that builds up, that generates goodwill, that brings life and laughter and love. It never forces or cajoles, it invites and it celebrates. Right? Good order is an act of sacrifice. It says, not my will, but yours. Not my life, but yours. And in so giving up of our lives, as Jesus said, we find it. We find our life. We find life and love and a holiness that no evil can touch. Right? That's the Christ story. That's why we're here. So that's the quick and dirty version of a giant topic that could keep going for hours, but we're going to leave it there. So hope you have a great week. Amen.